Just Baseball Show is live. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving week to you, Jack McMullen, Aram Layton. As always, the Just Baseball Show is brought to you by BetMGM. Hope you enjoy your college basketball this week. My favorite Thanksgiving Day tradition is not Cowboys football or Lions football. It's the 11 a.m. ballroom game at the Battle for Atlantis.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
where are these two basketball teams playing on the map right now during Thanksgiving?
Dude, I mean, you've got like 3 different Bahamas themed college basketball tournaments. Like, okay, you're at Baha Mar, and then you're at Atlantis, and then there's another one and another weird ballroom. So it just works. And my favorite thing about Atlantis is every spectator is just covered in darkness. The only lights that they spend on are like the actual court. But that's a college basketball conversation. We've got stove movement, man. Somebody turned on the burner, and it's clear that it's a gas stove and not electric. It's Marcus Semien for Brandon Nimmo. Nimmo, who was drafted by the Mets, heads to Arlington, and Semien goes to shore up the middle infield defensively for New York. So we'll talk about Nemian, holy smokes. Nimmo and Semien. That's going to be the nickname of the trade. We're going to talk about that for the first half of the episode. And then some interesting non-tender guys that were not offered a contract on Friday. Also, my favorite thing in baseball is when people try to turn relievers into a starter, and maybe the funniest one happened this weekend. So we'll talk about that and a couple other things. But excited to get this show going with Nimmo and Semien. What was your initial reaction, I guess, when that trade went down?
I felt like we were like kids again. I felt like these are the kind of trades you saw, you and I are 27, 28 years old. Like those are the trades we saw when we were 9, 10 years old, and kind of the end of that. Of course, our parents, that's the only trades they saw. There wasn't as much of the prospect for player trades, but it's gotten so much. I think it's just, we've drifted so far away where, now if you're a team that's trading an established player, you're almost always going to want prospects. And teams don't want to exchange contracts very often because they're very particular about where they're allocating their money. So very rarely do we get big leaguer for big leaguer trades. That's one side of it. And if you do, maybe it's something like G-Rod for Taylor Ward, which was awesome. But then very, very rarely do you get established big leaguer on the other side of 30 with years left on his contract traded for established big leaguer on the other side of 30 with years left on his contract. So I don't know. It just took me back to being a kid almost, where it's just, I can't think of the last time we had a trade like that, given the financial commitments, what these players have done in the past. In the Nimmo case, more so like what he meant to the franchise. And I love it. I love every bit of it because I think it just makes baseball a little bit more interesting for the casual fan. They're not going to care as much about the prospect trades. And I get that. But this is something that, even if this is the third sport you watch, like, this is still going to be something that you're like, whoa, that's an interesting swap.
We know exactly who these guys are. That was the big thing for me, where, how does it deviate from the prospect trade? The answer is prospects you project. You say, oh, I like this guy. Oh, I don't like this guy. Nobody really knows about prospects. If the Mets swapped Marcus Semien for Clifford and a couple other guys, obviously Ranger fans are going to be excited about Clifford, and they're going to go to the baseball reference page and they're going to see nearly 30 homers in the minor leagues.
But they go to the call up and listen, but that's why I like it, because how else are you going to know unless if you're dialed in?
And the reality is you spend as much time diving into these guys as anyone, and you still don't know. You have no idea how they're going to project. You also don't know how Joe Adell is going to mature over the course of his major league career. This guy's 26 years old. He was just flirting with 40 homers, but he was really bad before that. So guys in their early to mid-20s that are traded, like the Grayson Rodriguez swap, it jumbles my brain because I don't really know who Grayson's going to be in 5 years. But the thing about Brandon Nimmo and Marcus Semien is we know exactly the kind of player that they are. Nimmo's 33 years old. Semien's 35. There's no uncovered stone to these guys. The last stone uncovered with one of them was Semien moving over to second base in his 1 year with Toronto, and it just worked. So, like, you're not betting on really anything here. It's just swapping a big contract for a big contract, and that's why I like it. This was, you're right, a kid trade, but also an MLB The Show trade, where you just pick your favorite old guy on an expensive deal.
That was the other thought I had. Or like when you're simulating the season, you see like that trade happening, you go like, That's not something that would ever happen in real life. And I think it was a trade too where you look at it that it makes a lot more sense on the surface to like the Rangers side where people are saying, oh, like why would the Mets do this? And I tried my best to kind of wrap my head around it all and why I think they would. And I honestly do think it's a sign of more to come, right? Because I think for the Mets, the Rangers, clearly, we're going to talk about non-tender, players who were non-tendered, and two of the more significant ones were Rangers guys I think we're good business decisions, but if you're in a spot where money ain't a thing, you're probably tendering Heim a contract and just seeing how it goes. Maybe even Adolis you don't, but that's $18 million there. Now with this deal, it's roughly about $30 million in savings long-term for the Mets, but short-term, you're saving about $5.5 million for the next 2 years if you're the Rangers. Also on the Rangers side, I just think you're getting a more productive player at this stage. He's a little bit younger, but it's longer term, right? It's 5 years, $105 million versus what with Semien is about 3 years, 72.
So the interesting thing that came out, and I saw this breakdown on Spot Track, is the Mets retain $1 million per year of Nimmo. I don't know if that was a pay down scenario or that was just a stipulation in the contract, but the Mets are going to pay one of the 20.25 every year for the remainder of the deal. So it's effectively, I have the total money written down here. Semien is a 3 for 78 in his age 35 through 37 seasons. Nimmo is 5 for 96 in age 33 through 37. So 5 for 96 compared to 3 for 78.
So I think the money probably is a slight aspect to it. I think it's just two teams that needed to shake some things up too. Like I think the Semien Seager middle infield, as exciting as it was, and where they were able to kind of get things off on the jump, I think it was time to shake that up. Nimmo fills a void for them that I think makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, again, short-term saving some money because the Rangers aren't rebuilding. Everyone says, oh, maybe Seager's going next. I don't think so. I think they're trying to just reshuffle some of these assets and then figure it out. So now they get a little bit more wiggle room financially. I think every dollar matters because they very aggressively have pushed against, I think generally what they like to spend. Yeah. And then on the Mets side, I think Cohen doesn't really care too much about the money, obviously, as we know. But if they're about to go hand out some other big contracts, and we know they're going to try, like they're going to offer Pete Alonso, they may go, whale hunting with a Kyle Tucker, whatever it may be. You might as well clear up $20+ million in long-term financial commitments because I imagine that's just the one thing that Cohen's looking at is just how much money do we have allocated over the next handful of years. So even if it's short-term, a little bit more expensive in the grand scheme, it's saving them money. And I think when you look at the way Stearns likes to construct rosters, a really good defensive infield seems to have always been important for him in Milwaukee. And it was a huge Achilles heel for the Mets, this past year. Now you have Lindor and Semien up the middle. Even if Semien continues to slow down a little bit, you're going to get a great defender. But I think it's going to invigorate Semien a little bit. I think that's the bet that they're trying to cash in here too, is you bring that guy to New York, gives him kind of another life here. None of the batted ball qualities were much worse last year. So I think there's some hope that he can regain some of that. And again, I think we talked about the Mets needing to be shaken up. I don't think Nimmo is the guy that you're looking at to potentially shake this thing up, but it's shaking it up nonetheless. I also think, last thing real quick, the acquisition of Semien makes McNeil now expendable.
Of course.
Who, if you include the buyout, is owed about $17.75 million. So if you're able to move, let's even just say, to be conservative, 2/3 of McNeil's contract, you pay it down a little bit, which you should be able to do that, or you take on another $5 million from somebody that fits in the bullpen or whatever. Now you've cleared up a pretty significant amount of money. So I think that's the other side of it too. The acquisition of Semien makes McNeil expendable, who we've kind of said is another shakeup guy, get him out. And I think at that point, now you're looking at non-negligible savings and you shook up the roster a little bit.
The big thing here, and you just hit on, kind of the overarching points for both, is the reallocation of assets and what each team is prioritizing. And I want to get into that. We'll start with the Mets and we'll go to the Rangers, but those are going to be the next two segments here on the Just Baseball Show. Got about 30 seconds left. I just want to kind of leave you with this piece before we really dive in next segment. For me, at least, looking at the Mets, this is absolutely a precursor move to something else. Yes. And the question is Is that using your prospect capital via trade, or is that hunting in the Kyle Tucker waters? I have no idea. We're going to dive into that in about 5 seconds, but we'll be right back here on the Just Baseball Show. Just Baseball Show, Jack McMullen, Aram Leighton. We were talking about how this impacts the Mets, the Marcus Semien, Brandon Nimmo swap. Brandon Nimmo goes to Texas. Marcus Semien is the return. He comes from Texas to New York. A couple things right off the bat. It's funny, Bruce Bochy, how often did you hear about Bruce Bochy raving about Marcus Semien during their World Series run in 2023?
Yeah.
Oh, we have an agreement. He's always going to be at the top of the lineup card unless he tells me, and we'll change things up here. There was so much love to him rolling out there every single day. And then all of a sudden, it's like the production took a nosedive. Bochy's gone, and then Semien won't play a game for Skip Schumacher. I just think it's kind of funny. I have no idea if it's coincidental or not, but the lore of playing 162 games is sort of kind of gone when you're not performing to the standard of your $175 million deal.
Yeah, they don't care as much. I don't think it becomes as much of a calling card, but I do think it matters here in the respect that, for the Mets, what you've got, because I think it's funny. I think we talked about the unknown, and with these guys, there's less unknown because it's two vets, and you have such a large sample size of them being successful. The one variable that I'm looking at is it's two teams here basically betting on the other aging a little bit more quickly. And you may say, well, obviously Semien's going to age more quickly. He's 35 years old. I don't know, because we were just talking about it, you and I, not like a handful of episodes ago. And I was saying, I think that Brandon Nimmo contract is going to be really hard to move, because you look at, I think in the Nimmo case, like Semien's always been an outperform the peripherals guy. He's going to pull the ball in the air. He's going to make good swing decisions. His EVs are never going to be great. Nimmo, you can kind of see a slight decline in not only the just athleticism, where you've seen it kind of affect the defense, just the explosiveness, some of the offensive, qualities to him. And he's had a lot of nagging issues that seem somewhat concerning. Like I think the plantar fasciitis was a pretty big problem. You could see so many times during the year, Nimmo, who likes to sprint to first base when he walks, was kind of struggling to get down the line just in general. That said, he still hit 25 home runs and put up a 114 WRC plus. So it's a guy that you love to add to your team here, but he's not a guy that you can even throw out in center much anymore. So he's going more to a corner. And I think that was probably a big part of when you're looking at the roster construction for the Mets. They're saying, we need kind of, even though second base is in a premium position, we need key defenders at spots. Yep. And I think Semien's a guy that can, play really good defense at second base and give you the value up the middle. Whereas, Nimmo at this stage is just a fine defensive corner outfielder. And I feel like that's an area where they at least imagine that they can replace that production a little bit more easily than trying to find more defensive value. And yeah, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just, I think that's the thought process. And for the Rangers side, go get an established bat who's very good chance to give you 15% above average production, and is just steady as can be. They don't care about the defense as much. They've got some other good defenders in the outfield, and just plug them into a corner and get production there.
Yeah. Nimmo has done a good job in his career of scrapping the fragility aspect of it. I remember at the beginning of this show's existence in 2021-22, we were talking about Brandon Nimmo being a fragile baseball player and not being overwhelmingly available. And that came from 69 games in 2017, 69 games in 2019, 92 games in 2021. Those were 3 consecutive full seasons outside of 2018 when he played 140. But in his last 4, 151, 152, 151, 155. So he's on the field. But the Mets do have 600 plate appearances, 550 at-bats coming their way in Semien. But you're harping on the point of defense, and that is the most important one, because that was team identity-wise, what did the New York Mets in last year? You can point at a lot of individuals who, by the way, are no longer on the team, like Ryan Helsley not being the deadline pickup they forecasted. That was a huge piece of them not making the postseason. Cedric Mullins not being the deadline acquisition they forecasted, that was a huge piece of them not making the postseason. But if you look at the one overarching thing as a team, you're either looking at the starting rotation or you're looking at the defense. And I feel like it's easier to put a Band-Aid on the defense. It's a hell of a lot cheaper to put a Band-Aid on the defense than it is a Band-Aid on the starting rotation. You need to overhaul the rotation. And it seems like the Mets are committed to doing that with Kodai Senga being extremely available. But defense, like, there was a way to maneuver and swap this. And if it means taking on $7 million in 2026, I really don't think Steve Cohen cares that much. And you have that middle infield tandem now. And assuming a fully healthy Francisco Alvarez, that's an up the middle infield trio of the catcher Alvarez, the shortstop Lindor, and the second baseman Semien being all world. And then you've got Tyrone Taylor in center as the stopgap for probably Benj.
Yep.
This is a very, very good up the middle quartet. We were talking about the Cubs like this a couple of years ago when they had Bellinger. The Mets absolutely fill that right there. They need help elsewhere. Like, are Beatty or Vientos all world defenders at third base? Heck no. Was Alonso really bad at first base? Heck yeah. Is Alonso going to be a Met? Heck, I don't know. There are other pieces that need to go into the defense and the team identity as a whole, but they did get a heck of a lot better there.
Well, if you're planning to retain Pete Alonso as well, at least this makes the defense a little bit more palatable when you know the other side of the right side is going to be defended quite well. So you chip away at some of that and prioritize the offense. There, you pick your spots, right, to prioritize the offense, and first base is going to be a great spot to do that. And again, I do think the Rangers clearly short-term cash flow is important, and the Mets, I think it's just the overall financial picture for Steve Cohen, even though he's still going to spend like crazy, just clearing up some long-term liabilities. So it's a rare instance here. The reason why I think it matched up too is you had two unique circumstances where teams looking more at the long-term cash liabilities, where the other team's looking at more short-term cash flow, and usually every team's just looking at short-term cash flow. So it was a unique matchup there. I think that worked out really well also. And look, if it doesn't work out with Semien, you paid a little bit extra these 2 years, but you're out of the contract quicker. And I think that's the underrated part of the Nimmo thing is, look, I think maybe through the entirety of Semien's contract, so 3 of the 5 years, Nimmo's going to probably be more productive player, but then you're on the hook for 2 more years of Nimmo there, where Semien hits free agency, and the Mets, in 3 years have the ability to go, and clear that money off the books. So that's the interesting part of it. And I think the Rangers are okay with that for now, because if you look at the Rangers situation, they're going to have a lot of money off the books by the time that time comes around in 3+ years. So they'd rather, again, prioritize that short-term, financial flexibility.
The question that I want to answer in the next segment is, what do they do now? And, the Mets, I want to go through kind of their line of order, what they need to do to that roster on the position player front. And then the Rangers, how do they spend the money that they freed up without Marcus Semien? That's coming up in a moment right here on the Just Baseball Show. Just Baseball Show continues. We're still talking the Brandon Nimmo, Marcus Semien deal that moves Semien to New York, Brandon Nimmo to Texas. The question is, what do the New York Mets do now? And there are a couple of different ways that you can do it. You alluded to this earlier. They could be hunting in the free agent, big free agent pools like Kyle Tucker. That's obviously the name that jumps out. Oh, they move a left-handed hitting outfielder. They're going to go pursue Kyle Tucker, and they're going to pair Tucker and Soto. The Mets could totally do that, especially before we get to this, CBA coming to a close going into 2027. But I wonder, what are the other avenues in which they can attack backfilling Nimmo's role and production? There were a couple that jumped out to me. Cody Bellinger. Mm-hmm. Bellinger could make a lot of sense there, where he can play center. Then all of a sudden you have Benj come, and then you can have Bellinger play first if you don't retain Alonso. There's some malleability with Cody Bellinger's existence with the Mets that I find fascinating. You could also go and get Harrison Bader and continue to hammer home upgrading the outfield defense and the defense in general. But the one that intrigues me maybe the most is they just acquired Marcus Semien. They got a heck of a lot better in terms of middle infield defense without trading one of their 8 top 100 prospects, according to Just Baseball. And they have 9 top 110 prospects. You said Jack Weninger is just on the outside looking in. So effectively call it 9 blue chip prospects that you can move. And some are greater than others, right? There's going to be the three arms or McLean's untouchable. McLean's not being moved. But like a Tong and Sproat, they're valued a bit higher than, a Jack Wenninger is, or than, probably even a Ryan Clifford is. I just look at what they can do with their prospect capital, and I say, why can't you go be the team that gets Jarren Duran? The Red Sox want some pitching. Why couldn't you move some pitching for Jarren Duran? Would Tong for Duran straight up work? Like, that's where my brain starts to go. And I feel like Jarren Duran could be a really good fit with the New York Mets. Obviously, we've talked about Luis Robert before possibly being a fit. Duran is the better player at this point. Do you want to go get Wilyer Abreu and get one of the best defensive right fielders in baseball to handle a spacious right field at Citi Field? There are just so many different ways that they can attack this.
Yeah, that's the part I'm fascinated by, because I think, I'm a huge fan of Carson Bench, as you know, and I guess anyone who listens to the show knows, but I think he's an above average center fielder when it all comes together. I think off the bat, he may just be average, and it's just a different game in center field and for the New York Mets, where it metrically, I don't think you're going to grade out elite right off the bat there as you're just still getting comfortable. But I think he is an above average center fielder ultimately. But does that happen right away? Does that happen in the second half of the season? Does that happen in year two? Can I see a guy that's capable of holding it down? But if we're prioritizing defense right now, I can promise you that, Harrison Bader is going to be better defensively than Carson Bench this coming season.
Yeah.
So is that something that they want to prioritize in the short term? You put Bench in a corner now, I think he's closer to plus territory, right? Because he's still playing the corners, so he's still getting those reads. He's got the arm. He's got the closing speed. I think he would be great out there. So you have this flexibility, though, where it's like, okay, we can also have Tyrone and Benj in the aggregate. They're going to be very strong defenders there. Or we go get, a clear-cut center fielder, and now we kick Benj over to a corner where he's going to defend even better. And now we've got this unique defensive outfield as well. And maybe that eases Benj's transition to the big leagues where, if you do decide to have him break camp, which I think they should strongly consider, it's a little bit more calming, I think, when you can break camp as a corner outfielder versus the, opening day center fielder potentially for the New York Mets. So you're a little bit less to worry about in that regard. So I think that part of it's fascinating. And that's why I like the Bellinger shout that you give, because like he can plug, I think several different fallouts that could happen, because I'm sure the Mets don't even know how this whole thing's going to shake out. So usually don't want to jump and make a move before you know how the rest of the moves go. But if you are going to do that, Bellinger makes a ton of sense, because depending on how the offseason can go, you can plug him in different spots where he's still going to be incredibly valuable for you, which could also be corner outfield, right? It could be center, corner outfield. It could be first base. So yeah. I think Bellinger makes a ton of sense.
We've got about 60 seconds left on this segment. How do the Rangers maneuver after this? Because again, they have a longer term, greater commitment in terms of total money. They took on 5 years as opposed to 3, but they do free up about $7 million in space over the next 2 years. That's per year. It seems like the Rangers are reallocating, to your point. They shed the possible 12 that they were going to owe Adolis Garcia, more on that in a moment, and the possible 6 that they owe Jonah Heim. It just seems like they're going to try and optimize this offense a bit.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at what they're going to do in terms of just like how can they optimize this more, I don't know how much they can dramatically do. And I think that's why this trade for them was kind of prioritizing just the offensive production in general. Because I don't know how much they're going to be able to spend and allocate in some of these spots. So like this was just a clear upgrade offensively and just try to piece it together from there. I just don't know how aggressive they're going to be, because they still have, I think, a lot committed financially and still some pitching things that they need to figure out.
Only time will tell what the Texas Rangers are doing. They were active at the non-tender deadline. More on that in a moment here on the Just Baseball Show. Just Baseball Show, as always, is brought to you by our friends at BetMGM. We just talked about the Brandon Nimmo Marcus Semien deal, the swap between the Rangers and the New York Mets. Now I want to get into the non-tenders, and this is not a sexy thing at all, but there is value within the margins when it comes to guys who were not tendered a contract. So The way that this works, and I'm going to try and loosely define this, is last Friday we hit a deadline where you have to tender contracts to everybody that is not on a free agent deal on your roster. Those could be guys that are headed into arbitration. Those could be guys that are on the league minimum. If you don't deem that player worthy of their estimated arbitration number, if they're a little bit deeper into their big league career, or not worthy of the major league minimum, which is right around $800,000, then you don't have to tender them a contract and they hit free agency. So these are the guys who were not tendered contracts by their team and now enter the free agent pool. There are some names that, again, lack sex appeal entirely. Like you look at the guys that the Angels non-tendered, Gustavo Campero and Sebastian Rivero. If you know the positions they play, I will Venmo you a couple of bucks. There's just like, there are some other guys like a Adolis Garcia or a JJ Bleday that all of a sudden become sneaky, interesting adds to rosters, whether it's as a bench bat or a short platoon bat. The most notable one in recent years was probably Cody Bellinger when he signed that 1 year, $20-ish million deal with the Chicago Cubs. He was non-tendered by the Dodgers because the arbitration number was just getting so crazy. They were going to have to owe him about $27 million. They said, you know what, for the role that you would be playing with the Dodgers, you're not worth that. So Bellinger hits the free agent market. He signs that 1+1 deal with the Cubs, and now he's looking at lucrative deal after lucrative deal. So it's really interesting, and I'm sure it fascinates you.
Yeah, because I think there's a really unique aspect to it where there's always a few guys like the Bellinger's like the final boss example, but
Yeah.
like if you came out really hot and then had a year or two where you struggled, you're going to be a little bit more expensive than maybe a team wants to pay, and it creates this difficult conversation because you're saying, oh, well, if this player is interesting, then why didn't they just tender him a contract? Well, they're interesting at 1 million, maybe 2 million, but at 6 to 8 million, maybe it's not. So I think that's where it becomes really fun and interesting. Even a guy like MJ Melendez, right? Where has he fully put it together ever at the big league level? No, but he's really intriguing as a prospect. Has had good stretches in the big leagues, and that was a low number, and so he's non-tendered. Like that was an interesting, I think, outcome there, and a player that could be fun to pursue. So it always, I think, stimulates the kind of backfills the free agency group a little bit. And I think we got that this year with, I look at Adolis and has he been bad the last couple of years? Yeah. But I look at him and say, there's a few teams where I would be really excited about them taking a shot. And I keep thinking about Adolis Garcia to the Reds. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that would make all the sense in the world. So those are the things that, I think make this really fun.
Yeah. So I've got the complete list of non-tendered players, and I want you to kind of give me the elevator pitch, and we'll spend more time on the larger names. But I want you to give me the elevator pitch on why they could be good ads for a lot of teams around Major League Baseball. I'm going to skip the names like Gustavo Campero and Sebastian Rivero. I'll skip Ramon Urias too, because Urias is just like a bench infield or whatever. JJ Bleday, why is he intriguing?
Well, I think step one, whoever adds JJ Bleday won't run him out in center field the majority of the time. I don't really know why the Athletics did that. So, Bleday is coming off of a 2024 season where, he had a 120 WRC plus and hit 20 homers and gave you 3 F4. For whatever reason, the A's have run Bleday in the last couple of years out in center field a ton. He's not even a very good corner outfielder. So I don't know what that was. But they continued to run him out there last year too. And I don't think that helped when you're also struggling offensively. He has negative 27 defensive runs saved in the last 2 years in center field. But in the corners, he grades out just about average, maybe slightly below. So get this guy in a corner, get him up an opportunity to, just focus on the offensive side of things. And again, maybe you can get back to that 120 WRC plus that he put up. This wasn't over 110 games. It's 159 games in 2024.
Yeah. Alek Manoah, are you taking a shot? Alek Manoah was non-tendered by the Braves.
Yeah, I think he still deserves a few shots here. See what he's got. I think we haven't really fully seen him come back and see what it all could look like. We only got a little bit of AAA action last year where it didn't look great, but I still think he's worth a shot. No?
I think so. I would totally think so. And, it's probably as a minor league deal and you got to prove it. A guy that is worthy of a major league deal if his arm is okay, he was dealing with forearm discomfort. Evan Phillips was non tendered by the Dodgers. Evan Phillips was one of the better relievers and more underrated relievers in baseball for a couple of years there. He's just been dealing with a variety of injuries. This seems like the 2-year deal that somebody just throws at him.
Yeah, I mean, it's like with relievers, man, when they've got the history of doing it, and even when Phillips was on the mound early in this year, like the stuff was still loud, before he got hurt. So yeah, it is a guy that I think plenty of teams. He'll probably be one of the busier in terms of the non-tendered players, and all the offers that he'll get because it's a really good fastball. He's got the sweeper, and we see this happen all the time with relievers, and they bounce right back and ball out.
Are you fascinated by Will Brennan at all, the outfielder that was non-tendered by the Guardians,
I
or
know
not
you
really?
are.
I know I am. I mean, like, I would absolutely take him on a minor league deal. I feel like there's gonna be a team that throws him a 1-year, $2 million major league deal.
It should be like a Rockies type. I want to work on this separately. I was texting Peyton Genus, our video extraordinaire. I was like, I want to create a YouTube video of just like trying to build like the best Rockies team possible. But like I want to look at all of the players who have succeeded at Coors over the last 10 years and StatCast here, whatever. I won't bore you with all the details. We have time constraints here. But my early thought is like contact oriented guys with better than 30 grade power that would just, I think, eat there. And why not go for like a Will Brennan type and see how it works out there? They have way too many swing and miss guys in Colorado, both in the system and in the big leagues, for a home environment that rewards you for just putting the ball in play. You have
Yeah.
all these guys. How does the altitude help you if you strike out too much? And that's all the Rockies pursue. I don't understand it. But yeah, like a Will Brennan would make sense in that regard. That's, you look at his 2024 season as well. He was close to league average offensively, and can play a decent corner outfield and plug in and center in a pinch.
Our guy Max Kranick is recovering from an elbow surgery again right now, but again, seems like that kind of 2-year partially guaranteed deal, maybe a split deal where you can just break into a bullpen. Like it's a fun 4-seam slider combo.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of screams like a type of guy that the Marlins would love to bring in, right? Where you can kind of Jansen junk Swiss Army knife this guy, and then wait, all of a sudden he might just be an outright starter with the stuff the way it looks. So, I think it's all about the health for Kranick. We've talked about it, obviously, especially you have a familiarity with him. So we're always going to think he's underrated, but I really do think he is underrated. And what he was doing in the early going in 2025 was spectacular. He was kind of holding that bullpen up in the early part of the season. And, we've seen him have big league success in other stints as well. I know the overall numbers aren't great, but he's had some really impressive outings, and looked like the best version of himself in 2025. So I think plenty of teams are going to be interested in, adding him as kind of a Swiss Army knife type of arm.
Pirates non-tendered Alexander Canario, who was a Cubs prospect for a while. Is there any level of intrigue left for you?
I think so. I think more of like the short platoon guy, right? Just go
Yeah.
crush lefties. Um, it was kind of surprising how much he struggled in general this year, but still just 25 years old. So I think the odds are stacked against him when you look at some of the underlying data, but there's still enough there, I think, with the ability to play all three outfield spots and the power that he has.
We've got about a minute left, but we'll take it into the next segment as well. How about Nathaniel Lowe? Like, are you intrigued enough by Nathaniel Lowe? Personally, I'd rather just grab Andujar and put him at first base than go
Yes,
get Nathaniel Lowe.
I would, but if that's not an option, I think he's worth a flyer for, I think, plenty of second division teams. Yeah, I think he showed some signs of life in Boston there. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's still, even then, it wasn't the most exciting player to watch, but he put up a 114 WRC plus over, you know, 34 games. He's worth a flyer, but yeah, I'd rather an Andujar as well.
We'll talk about the Rangers and an interesting Ray in a moment. Just Baseball Show rolls on. We're talking the guys that were non-tendered at the end of last week that now enter the free agent pool. We just hit on Nathaniel Lowe, who was non-tendered by the Boston Red Sox. Now I want to get to Christopher Morel, who was non-tendered by the Tampa Bay Rays. The name that was on the trade block forever for the Chicago Cubs, and they were just looking to move. Morel was a big piece of the Isaac Paredes deal that got him to Chicago before the reroute to Houston in the Kyle Tucker trade. But Morel has been brutal since going over to Tampa, and now Christopher Morel is non-tendered. Him and Fraley were the two non-tenders for Tampa. Jake Fraley is a defensive-oriented outfielder. Christopher Morel is one of the bigger question marks in baseball. Morel is just our new version of Jose Siri, where the ability's there to be an all-star. You just got to hit the baseball, and he hasn't. What does a gamble on Christopher Morel look like?
Well, that's the hardest part with Morel is, at least with Siri, when he's not hitting, he's going to go play like elite center field. Morel should be a good defender. I don't know why he's not. He's an above average runner. He has an elite arm, but you put him in the infield and he throws sinkers. So your first baseman's miserable. You put him in the outfield and his reads and routes just aren't great. And then offensively, it's kind of one swing for one spot. He is trying to pull the ball in the air to left field as hard as he can every single time. And like that may work for some guys, but when you have some swing and miss and chase issues, like it can really be easy to expose. And that's exactly what we saw. But at 26 years old, when you've got the tools that he's got, I'm always, if I have an open spot, I'm very intrigued still in giving a guy like that the opportunity. But it's just, to me, it's kind of a frustrating game similar to Siri, where it's just like, you're just going to do the same thing and struggle with the same things consistently. And it seems like for now, the answer is yes. But he does have time to potentially improve those things. He hits the living crap out of the ball. And I think the biggest hurdle for me with him, though, is just like, where you're kind of just sticking him somewhere by default. There's nowhere that he is necessarily good defensively.
Yeah. The Rangers did not deem Adolis Garcia worthy of his about $12 million arbitration estimate. What do you deem Adolis Garcia worthy of? If you were sitting in one of these decision-making chairs and you were told, hey, we can bring Adolis Garcia in on a 1-year deal, what are you comfortable giving him?
Ooh.
Because the answer is not 12. Is it 6?
No,
is it 10?
I was thinking 6. I don't think I'd go above 6. I mean, we're talking about back-to-back seasons here where he has been below the league average offensively. And, I think he's still worth a shot, but we're talking about hits the other side of 30. So age 31, age 32 seasons are both bad. That's not the most encouraging side of things, but, and off of, some injuries as well. But at the same time, he's still hitting the ball really hard. Change of scenery could help. I think you look at some aspects of the batted ball quality. He actually hit the ball harder in 2025, full mile per hour up in the average exit velocity department. His launch angle was up a little bit. Like there were some encouraging underlying aspects. And I think from that perspective, like you look at the WOBA, ex-WOBA, they're about 25 points there. The expected slug, about 25 points there. So maybe you drop him in the right stadium and, you can squeeze out a little bit more, in value. And I wonder, like, if I'm the Reds or something like that, I'd give him 6 to 8 million, I think, on a 1 year and give it a shot.
What about Jonah Heim, who is the other guy non-tendered? He's not worth 6, according to the Texas Rangers. He's an interesting one to me because I could see another team saying, you know what, I think you are worth 6.
That's the funny one. Because I was going to say, I think in the right situation, he's a pretty easy tender him a contract candidate. Like it just, I think with the situation that they were in, and again, Heim, where it's back-to-back years of him being bad, you're like, yeah, we'll just, if Heim is the same player he was the last 2 years, we're going to be kicking ourselves because every dollar matters right now, and we could have allocated that $6 million elsewhere. Whereas I think another team says, well, he could bounce back in worst case scenario. We have a fine backup at a little bit more than we wanted to spend. So I think a team's going to end up coming in at 4 million or so. And I don't think he's going to lose too much.
No, I don't think so. And if Austin Hedges got 3.5 or 4 from Cleveland, I feel like Jonah Heim can get 4 million to be a backup somewhere else. A couple more guys here. Michael Toglia, the Rockies non-tendered Toglia, mammoth power, mammoth swing and miss. Toglia is a physical specimen when you see him in person. But this, is he still a major league first baseman?
He's a minor league deal guy, I think,
Okay.
and he has a chance to prove that he could be a major league first baseman. There's a lot of, I think especially the data darling aspect of him. Like there's a reason why a lot of people I think picked him as a breakout guy. A lot of very analytically driven people like some of the peripherals there, but he swings and misses too much, and then you take him out of Coors, it's only going to be worse. But yeah, this is a perfect example of like, why are these guys the guys that we've got at Coors Field right now? Like, I think we need a little bit more contact-oriented players here. I think it's more of a minor league deal for him.
Got you. And then the last one is MJ Melendez, a guy that I know that you alluded to. Do you feel more comfortable with Melendez than you do Tolia? It seems like yes.
Yeah, I would rather give Melendez a shot. The defense got better in a corner. I think there were some other aspects I think that make him worth a shot and a little bit more of a track record at hitting.
Got you. Okay, we have about 2 minutes left in this segment. I'm going to flip-flop because we were going to talk about the Braves. I want to save the Braves for last. Teams are reportedly interested, including the Detroit Tigers, in Ryan Helsley as a starting pitcher. Ryan Helsley, the all-star closer in St. Louis that was acquired by the Mets at the trade deadline. And Helsley was not very good as the Met setup guy for Edwin Diaz. Ryan Helsley is a guy that has historically thrown 100 miles an hour with a 90-mile-an-hour slider. What about Ryan Helsley, Aram Leighton, screams starting pitcher to you? There's literally nothing that screams starting pitcher to me.
He threw a curveball sometimes.
And this right here is why it is my least favorite trend in baseball right now. This guy should be a starter. This guy should be a starter. Just because Michael King and Clay Holmes did it doesn't mean that every reliever in Major League Baseball can do it.
The strike rate was higher than it's been the last couple years from the fastball. Like the slider command is good, I guess, but the fastball shape isn't very good. The four-seamer got crushed last year, so why would you then want to extend that out to trying to turn over lineups when it's a two-pitch mix? I don't really get this one. And I feel like it's just agents. It's a new thing that they're doing to just try to squeeze out some extra value in their guys.
Like first it was, I mean, Jeff Hoffman, right? Was Hoffman ever going to start a game for the Toronto Blue Jays? No. Jordan Hicks, like that was a failed attempt at the starting pitching thing. But at least they had a track record there. Helsley hasn't started games in the big leagues. It nauseates me that we look at a guy's mix and say, yeah, you know what? He can be a starting pitcher. No, let him get back to throwing 100 and let him be a dominant closer. I mean, brother, Aroldis Chapman was starting games in the minor leagues. Was anybody going to sign Aroldis Chapman to be a starter? Absolutely freaking nuts. Home stretch here. We got about 6 minutes left. We're going to talk about the Braves in a moment on the Just Baseball Show. Wrapping up the Just Baseball Show here, Jack McMullen, Aram Leighton, by talking about the Atlanta Braves, who have started to be sneakily active. Now, one of them was an interesting deal for Raisel Iglesias. Raisel Iglesias is back in Atlanta. Iglesias got a 1-year, $16 million deal. That's a lot of money for a guy that is in the 10 to 15 range when you were to power rank closers in Major League Baseball. Raisel is a very, very talented closer, and he has been a reliable closer for the Atlanta Braves here. But bringing him back on $16 million, I feel like there were other pieces you could have pursued for that price point. No, like how important do you feel like loyalty was here for Atlanta and bringing him back?
I think a little bit. I think a big part of it too is them betting on the Raisel Iglesias that you got kind of the rest of the way. Like you look at the final, basically from when he gave up a run on July 26th, and then from that point forward, 27 appearances. Iglesias had a 0.34 ERA in 26 and 2/3 innings, 27 strikeouts, 1 earned run. So it really looked like it was kind of one bad little stretch for him. Even when you go over the final 45 appearances from him, which is 43 and 1/3 innings, he pitched to a 1.25 ERA, 30% strikeout rate, 6% walk rate. So I think the familiarity is important, but I think you blend that with the fact that he was kind of back to prime Raisel Iglesias in the second half plus of the season. I'd say more than the second half of the season. And I think that's the part that I think they're buying into here and saying maybe some other teams are looking at the cumulative numbers, but based on what we saw from the rest of the season, he may have been worth more than that. And Opponents in the final 45 appearances from him slashed 137, 196, 178. A triple one slash line for a 374 OPS is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is pretty nuts. So, I mean, Rysel made a lot of sense to me. The other thing about Atlanta that made a lot of sense to me was swapping Nick Allen for
I
utility
love
help.
that trade.
I loved this trade for the Atlanta Braves. I haven't seen anything reported otherwise. Apparently, it's just a straight swap. Mauricio Dubon goes from Houston to Atlanta for Nick Allen. Nick Allen was the everyday shortstop for the Atlanta Braves, and he provided literally the worst offensive production from any shortstop in Major League Baseball. He was a black hole in the 9 spot for Atlanta offensively. Now, he was one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball. They prioritized that. How far did that get him this year? They finished 4th in the division. I look at Mauricio Dubon and I say, slam the upgrade button here for the Atlanta Braves. Houston gets a good backup shortstop to Jeremy Pena. If Pena has to miss time, that feels like an okay stopgap. But there's so many things that Dubon can do for a Major League Baseball team. And the Astros loved him. Their fan base loved him. Atlanta's going to love bringing Mauricio Dubon in. And you look at the OPS, like, it's not awesome. It's a mid 600s. This guy does so many other things outside of just, slug and walk that make you feel good about what Dubon can bring to a baseball team.
Well, and you maybe don't have to address shortstop, but you also can still address shortstop and then put him somewhere else. So he's a good insurance policy if free agency doesn't go the way that you think, or the trade market doesn't go the way that you think, where, okay, we can plug Dubon in at short where he's going to grade out still strong defensively. But Dubon's going to grade out well defensively at literally every single position. So kind of similar to the Bellinger thing we were talking about, where, if he goes to the Mets, he can plug several different holes. Obviously, it's not as sexy, but with Dubon, like, you can plug him in at several different spots here, and fill different gaps that you may have depending on how the offseason goes for you if you're the Braves. And I understand that they found some value in Nick Allen, and for what they got him for, it was worth it. But I think they realized they needed a little bit more offense, and I think they're probably going to still aim higher for their primary shortstop. But if it doesn't work out in terms of a bargain or a good opportunity, then they can plug Dubon there and feel okay about that.
You have to assume that Atlanta is entertaining the idea of a reunion with Ha-Sung Kim. It went actually pretty well at the end of the 25 season, but as it stands right now, Dubon's their shortstop. If Kim can play shortstop and you have Dubon as this hyper utility guy, why can't you float Ozzie Albies in trades? I honestly would not float him. I would try to retain Kim. I would keep Albies, and I would have Dubon fill out that bench that was really bad last year. Right now, your projected bench is Vidal Brujan, Brett Wisely, Michael Ciani, and Eli White. That's not good enough. So Dubon is your bench, your everyday come off the bench utility piece. I feel like is really good. We got about a minute here. Do you think the Braves make that serious run at Kim or via the trade market?
I still think they do. I think now it's almost Dubon gives them leverage, right? Now, we're like every single time they go for a player at a different position, they're going to say, oh, well, we've got Dubon, right? Like, so like we're okay. We're not desperate for you. But I still think they make a run at Kim. I still think they make a run at a couple other shortstops. And then they have the fallback here of being able to plug in, Dubon is, I think in a perfect world, he's a super utility guy for you, because I think what the Braves are looking at is saying we had injuries at so many different spots and we need a better player than what we've been plugging in to actually be able to fill in at these spots. And now Dubon can be that guy if anybody gets hurt at any specific spot. But he's also an option if, you don't want to overpay for a specific position as well.
Yep. That's been your Just Baseball show. Thank you guys so much for joining us. A bit of a light week with Thanksgiving here, but we will talk to you a little bit later this week. As always, appreciate it.